So just a quick review. It looks like most people heard about this webinar through the RPIC newsletter, through FixUp, and also word of mouth. I'm going to now run a second poll for you. Perfect. So it looks like most people have been to an RPIC event before. If this is your first time, welcome. Stop sharing. All right, looks like most people have joined. There's still a few left, but I'll start anyway. So my name is Sarah Oravan, and I'll be your host for today. I'm a policy analyst in the Real Property and Material Policy Division at the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat. I'm also a long-standing volunteer with RPIC and have been involved with the planning and delivery of many previous contaminated sites workshops. As I'm hosting this webinar from Ottawa today, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional and unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory, and I invite you to take a moment to reflect on where you are today as you are listening into this webinar. Welcome, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for RPIC's 5th in a series of free webinars entitled Canadian Federal Contaminated Sites Cleanup. The Real Property Institute of Canada is an organization with the primary goal of developing and fostering a high professional standard for real property management within the federal public sector, and to provide a forum for information exchange and continuous improvement. RPIC provides a forum for networking, opportunities to seek expert advice, and, as we are doing here today, providing training and career development through workshops, training sessions, and seminars. As you can see on the screen, the next big RPIC event is the 2-day virtual national real property workshop entitled 1GC, The Art of Integration, and will take place on November 25th and 26th this year. Registration is now open. I'm actually going to post a couple of links for you in the chat box here. There you go. Before we begin with our speakers, I have a few housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded and a playback link will be sent to the email that you provided to register for the webinar. The participants list will also be shared to enable continued conversation. However, if you'd like to have your name removed prior to the list being distributed, please contact us by email at admin@rpic-ibic.ca. You can find the email address also in the chat box. If you have any technical issues during the webinar, my colleague Martine Lalonde and I will be available to assist you. Please contact us directly by using the drop-down menu in the chat box. Please note that attendee microphones will be muted. As such, we'll be using the Q&A function in your Zoom webinar menu to capture questions. We'll be monitoring the Q&A chat box and chat boxes, and we'll attempt to get through all the questions by the end of the session. Please feel free to provide your questions in French and English. And if you have any questions after the session is ended, please reach out to the presenters through their contact information provided at the end of the presentation. The session is scheduled to run for 1 hour, with our experts taking center stage for 40 minutes. There's time at the end reserved to respond to questions that haven't been answered through the Q&A and chat box. So let's get started. Our moderator for today's session is Tim Palmater. Tim is an Ontario Regional Director of Environmental Services and Contaminated Sites at Public Service and Procurement Canada. Tim has been with PSPC for over 25 years and provides regional leadership for various environmental service providers to PSPC Ontario regional clients. He also provides national leadership for PSPC's Fix Up program delivery. He has provided senior leadership on several large contaminated sites remediation projects, including Randall Reef and the Port Hope Area Initiative. Tim was born and raised in Nova Scotia and has a Bachelor of Science from Acadia University. Tim, thank you for leading today's discussion. It's now over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I'm just going to introduce the panel before we get started. So we're very fortunate today to have 3 distinguished panel members here. And just got to find my notes here. Okay, so our first speaker is going to be Martine Lalonde. Martine is an environmental specialist and has been with PSPC, Public Service and Procurement Canada, for over 10 years. Martine is currently coordinating our national PSPC expert support initiatives from Ottawa. And PSPC, under its expert support role in Fix Up program, is responsible for analyzing, communicating federal contaminated sites demand forecasts with industry and service providers. Her educational background is in environmental studies from the University of Ottawa. Our second panel member is Alyssa Dunbar. Alyssa is a physical science officer for the Federal Contaminated Sites Action Plan Secretariat at Environment and Climate Change Canada. Alyssa currently is responsible for coordinating expert support activities under the program and ensuring national consistency in program, policy, and scientific advice. Her educational background is in environmental science from McMaster University and the University of Ottawa. Our third panelist is Jeffrey Yakmachuk. Jeffrey is a policy analyst for Northern Contaminated Sites Program Branch with the Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada, otherwise known as CERNAC. Jeffrey's educational background is in public policy and policy administration from Concordia University in Montreal. So welcome, panel members. Before I turn it over to Martine to start it off, I'll just remind people again, if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A section of the chat or in the chat, and we will get to your questions at the end of the presentations by the 3 panelists. So with that, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Martine. Martine?
Hi everybody. Thank you, Tim, for the introduction. As we mentioned, so welcome to this presentation. I'm just going to go through a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. So we have 2 101 courses, so one on the Federal Contaminated Sites Action Plan and the other one on the Northern Embedded Mine Reclamation Program. Then we'll go through forecasts. So we'll look at how is the funding distributed in these 2 programs. So we're going to do a national overview, and then depending of the audience, which I'm going to survey you a bit later, then we'll tackle 1 or 2 regions in Canada. That being said, if the information that is not presented today, it is within the presentation and available to you. So you can either contact me and I will be able to share that presentation to you, or we also have our new collaborative platform called GC Collab, and you'll be able to access the presentation there. After, we'll go through our newly developed interactive map tools, which I'm pretty excited to show you all the functionality of it. One aspect of the presentation I think will be of interest of lots of you is procurement approaches, so how to do business with us. And then we'll go through the next step and we'll request some of your feedback a bit on our program. And then contact information and a few other things on GC Collab. First of all, we'll start with a poll question. So we're interested in which field you're working in, so that way we can adjust the presentation that will be the most relevant to you. Oh, interesting results. So we have a lot of our colleagues on the webinar, which is nice. People from different level of government. We also have a good portion of the audience from consulting backgrounds and contractors, which is good because in the procurement approaches, I'll be able to touch on both. And we have a few of others, and now you kind of spark my curiosity. So I'll be curious to know which company you're working for. So I'm assuming maybe a drilling company or a lab. So if you don't mind writing in the chat, so I'll be able to hopefully target this presentation a bit more to your need. And then on this, I'll let you in the good hands of Alyssa for a little while.
Thanks, Martine. Hi, everybody. So to start off, I'm going to give a bit of background on the FICSAP program for those few of you who may not be familiar from the last poll. So the Federal Contaminated Sites Action Plan, known as FICSAP, was originally established in 2005 with the main objectives of reducing risk to human health and the environment, as well as reducing the associated environmental liability on federal contaminated sites. FICSAP is primarily a financing program that enables federal departments, agencies, and crown corporations to clean up the federal contaminated sites that they are responsible for with the support of expert advice. To be eligible for FICSAP, a contaminated site must be located on lands owned or leased by the federal government or on non-federal lands for which the federal government has accepted responsibility. Additionally, in most cases, the contamination must have occurred prior to April 1st, 1998. The departments that manage these federal contaminated sites are known as custodians. So if we can move to the next slide, great. FICSAP has built up a number of achievements through the first 15 years and 3 phases of the program. With $4.5 billion invested, Canada has seen the growth of a world-class contaminated sites management industry, including many of you on the webinar today. The program has funded the remediation of over 2,000 sites to date, resulting in 22,800 direct jobs and $2.4 billion of spending in Canada's north. Additionally, FICSAP has developed upwards of 90 guidelines, technical guidance, training, and tools to assist custodians in the management of their contaminated sites. And there is new training and guidance coming online all the time. The Federal Contaminated Sites Inventory, also known as the FCSI, is an online database that contains information about all of the known or suspected federal contaminated sites in Canada, a subset of which are FICSAP sites. At the start of FICSAP in 2005, there were 6,200 federal contaminated sites, representing a liability of about $1.1 billion. Over mostly the first few years of the program, but still continuing today, thanks to concerted assessment efforts, the industry has grown to nearly 24,000 sites. Despite this increased scope of challenge, nearly 70% of sites have been closed and returned to productive use, including 2,200 of the highest priority sites that have been funded by FICSAP. And the types of sites funded by FICSAP are very diverse, as you can see in the photos on this slide here, and they include things like marine sites, sites on permafrost, sites on reserve, remote sites, urban sites, etc. Looking towards the future, FICSAP has been renewed by Cabinet for another 15 years with funding renewal in 5-year increments. We are currently in the first year of phase 4, which will last through 2025 and will see $35 million in assessment work and $1.2 billion in remediation and risk management work. Phase 4 includes 18 custodians with policy oversight, guidance, and coordination provided by a secretariat where I work, led out of Environment and Climate Change Canada and supported by the Treasury Board Secretariat. And that's it for FCSAP 101. It's over to you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Alyssa. Hello, everyone, and thank you for the introduction, Tim. I will briefly discuss the Northern Abandoned Mine Reclamation Program, which is a relatively new program managed by Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada. So the acronym for that is CERNAC. So in 2020, CERNAC was able to secure a long-term source of funding to accommodate the lengthy remediation posed by its portfolio of abandoned mine projects. So we're looking at an investment of $2.2 billion over a 15-year period. The program includes 8 projects. 5 of them are located in Yukon and 3 are located in the Northwest Territories. Important to note that these projects had previously been a part of the Federal Contaminated Sites Action Plan. These sites need long-term investment, and CERNAC decided it needed to manage them on their own, given their scope and duration. So out of these 8 projects, Giant Mine and Faro Mine are considered as major projects due to their enormous costs and technical complexity. So let's move to the next slide. So Giant Mine is a former gold mine within the city of Yellowknife, Northwest Territories. The site poses several human health and environmental risks, most notably the presence of highly toxic arsenic trioxide. As well, Giant Mine is a high-profile site given its tumultuous history and proximity to the city. It's not uncommon to see the project discussed in the media. Remediation is expected to begin in 2022 and will last approximately 8 to 10 years. So on to Faro. Faro Mine is located in Yukon, 4 hours northeast of the city of Whitehorse. One of the largest open pit lead zinc mines in the world. Now it's one of the most costly contaminated sites in Canada. There are several significant risks posed by the project, including acid generating waste rock, tailings, and contaminated water. So some of the project partners include several First Nations organizations and the town of Faro. And remediation is expected to begin in 2024-25 and will last more than 10 years. So Faro, Giant, and the 6 other abandoned mine projects are all in their planning phases at the moment. Because the implementation of remediation work is still several years away on most of these projects, the Abandoned Mine Program has ensured that CERNAC can properly manage the scope and duration of the projects. And now I will turn it over to Martine for a poll question.
Thank you, Jeff. Frey, then I have another question for you, and I'd like to know what are the main areas of operation of your company? So you can click more than one, but maybe click the one or select the ones that you would like me to focus on today. Oh, wow, this is a great distribution. So I'm just gonna take a few. Okay, so I would say, wow, about 50% of you guys are from Ontario, work in Ontario. So I think we'll focus on that region. And very close behind, we have Atlantic. So that's something we can cover as well. We have a lot of people as well from the Pacific region, 36%, as well as the prairies. What I can say about Pacific region is we have a similar presentation set to happen at the BC Best Conference at the end of the month on October 29th. So if ever you're interested in a full-on presentation more geared towards that region, then I would invite you to do so at that point. But once again, that presentation is available to you and include all the regions, so we'll be able to cover. You'll be able to refer to it after the fact, and at any point if you have any questions, then you can contact me at any time. So we'll start with the thick of the subject, with the federal contaminated sites demand forecast. So seems like a big slide, lots of text, but what I wanted to mention is this is the best information we have. We are set to update our planning information at least twice a year, so usually in the spring and in the fall. So what I will present today is the data we have from April. However, we're in the midst of updating our numbers right now for the next 5 years, and once again we'll present that kind of information to you again. I would say stay tuned for the winter, so January, February, March, that's when we'll have an update. And as any of you work in project management, you know things change not on a daily basis, but sometimes you could. And there's stuff that we tried to predict, some we didn't, like the pandemic. So as things change, we try to update our work plan accordingly. At the same time, what we present to you is an overview. In terms of respecting the integrity of the bid process, I cannot go drill down to every individual site, but at least to give you an idea of the distribution of sites within the two programs. As you can see on this slide, it's just to give you an idea how much funding is associated to the both programs. So you have the FICSAT program and the Northern Abandoned Mine Reclamation program. And you can see it's almost half and half. So in terms of the NAMR sites, it's averaged $225 million a year. And for the FICSAT, it's about $250 million a year. So the message I want to convey on this one is there's a lot of work and we'll need your help to achieve it. If I focus a bit more on the Northern Abandoned Mine Reclamation program, this is the distribution of funding between the two territories, so between the Yukon and the Northwest Territory. And you can see for the Yukon, the average is about $105 million a year, and for the Northwest Territory is about $115 million a year on average. A national overview. What I wanted to show you at this point is we have as Alyssa mentioned, we have $1.2 billion. Most of it on the graph on the top right corner, is most of this funding are for remediation and long-term monitoring fundings, and a bit for assessment. We're looking at 1,275 sites for remediation, and most of them sites are remediating. There's assessment money associated to them. What you can see in the circular graph is this distribution of funding between the regions. So there's funding all over Canada, different sites located all over Canada, but the major regions are Pacific, which in this case include British Columbia and the Yukon. We have a lot of work set in Ontario, and after that we have the Northern a bit with 15%, and Prairies in Quebec and Atlantic. The other thing I wanted to point out is the graph on the bottom corner. So this is the list of the custodians involved in that program. I know lots of acronyms, I just couldn't spell it out, all of them, but it shows you the amount of funding per custodian. So you can see custodians with the significant amount of funding. We have the National Defence, we also have Indigenous Services Canada, and then we have also Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs as well, Transports Canada, and my department, Public Services and Procurement Canada, and DFO, and Environment Canada as well. So for those who are not aware, the difference between Indigenous Services Canada and Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, the major difference, but I know there's different criteria, but the major difference is Indigenous Services Canada will take care of the sites that are located south of the 60th parallel, while Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs will take care of sites that are north of the 60th parallel. In terms of distribution of sites, just to give you an idea of the size of the projects, funding-wise, you can see on the assessment that 95% of the sites are below 250K. So not that they're small projects, but because it's still a significant amount of money, but we're not talking about multi-million assessment fund projects. In terms of remediation, we have about the same idea. So it's quote unquote like smaller size projects. So about 87% are below $1 million. And we have about 155 sites that are $1 million and over. What I want to show you on this slide is the different way a project can be procured. So you can see the different procurement models, but the one I want to show you today is the 4 we have over here. So custodian could go through my department, which is Public Services and Procurement Canada, and we could procure the project on their behalf. As you can see below, this is the amount of funding that will flow through us, through PSPC. We also have Defense Construction Canada in orange, which is the National Defense can procure on their own. They can use PSPC, but they also use DCC to procure their work. There's another portion is through Indigenous Services Canada in gray in this graph, and ISC received the funding a bit differently, and they receive through grants and contribution, meaning that that funding goes directly to a First Nation or Indigenous community, and it's up to that community to contract or procure the work themselves. And the last one is internal. So some custodians will procure the work themselves, but they use the same platform or the same websites as PSPC, which I'll mention a bit later, but it's called buyandsell.gc.ca. So all the tendering will be posted on that website. We'll start with Atlantic. So if we kind of go down a level and focus in Atlantic, the amount of funding that's associated with that region is $48 million. Once again, same trend. So mostly remediation, long-term monitoring is money, a bit of assessment funding. On the circular graphs, you can see where the funding is divided through the provinces. And you can see that most of them, 3/4 of it will be in Newfoundland and Labrador. In terms of major custodians, the one with the most significant amount of funding, National Defense and Fisheries and Ocean. In terms of distribution of sites, once again, it's the same trend. So an assessment is mostly sites that are less than $250,000, while in remediation as well is really smaller scale remediation projects. In terms of procurement provider, you can see on the assessment side is majority of the funding will flow through DCC, Defense Construction Canada, and for the remediation and long-term monitoring funding, it's again mostly DCC and a bit of PSPC. I'll skip over Quebec. If you're interested on the information on Quebec, we had that same presentation in French on October 6th, and will be available on the ARPIC website if you want to listen to it after the fact. We'll focus on Ontario as well, because most of you guys seem interested to that region. So instead of funding, and then for Ontario, it's $360 million, roughly. Same trend again, mostly remediation and long-term monitoring funding, a bit of assessment. The major player in that regions are Fisheries and Ocean, National Defense, Indigenous Services Canada, and Transport. Distribution of sites, I would say it's similar as well, in a sense that our smaller assessment projects or sites, so 93% of them are below 250,000. And in terms of remediation and long-term monitoring, we're looking at 76% of sites are below $1 million. And then we have about 38 sites that are $1 million and over. Okay. Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot this one. In terms of procurement provider, on the assessment side, you can see that a lot of funding will go through internal, so meaning that custodian will procure the work themselves, in yellow. And you can see Indigenous Services Canada has a lot of assessment project coming up, and some project will go through PSPC as well. In terms of the remediation long-term monitoring projects, you could see that PSPC has a good portion of it, DCCs as well, and Indigenous Services Canada has some remediation and long-term monitoring project as well. In terms of times, I won't go through all of that because we're going to be here for the entire afternoon, but you can refer to it after the fact. What I wanted to show you is this interactive map tool that was created. And you can see here, so this is a web-based tool accessible to anybody. It's bilingual. You don't need an account. You just put the address and you get to the tool. Sarah will be able to put the address of the tool in the chat box, but after the fact in the presentation, you also have the address. And as you can see is, if I move my screen, let's say we'll go to Ontario, then you can see that the dashboard on the left will modify depending of how many the sites information you see on the screen. It's a pretty neat tool. We have different layers. So you can see here you have the FICSAP sites, you have the Northern Abandoned Mine sites as well, and then you can add the treaties as well if you're, and then add the different layers. You can have different, that's the priority. You can focus on a specific region if you're interested, and you can add different base layers, like if you want topographic or you want the streets and things like that. The other thing I found pretty neat is you can search a site. So let's say we go to Rice Bridge, which is a PSPC site. And then you zoom all the way to it, and then you can click on it, and then it gives you sites. And then you can zoom out, see if there's maybe other sites in the area, and then it gives you like the custodians and which step they're at. It also, if you click on the little arrows, give you the contaminant type, the medium of it. And then you can click on the link and it brings you all the way to the federal contaminant sites inventory for even more information. I'm pleased to announce that we'll be adding information as the program evolves, as we move on this map tools. We're thinking of putting the range of the funding. So maybe give you an idea of the size of the project. Is it like $1 million project or a multi-million-dollar project? But it won't be on the tool until I would say January. That's mostly when we will be updating that tool. If you're interested to a user manual to know the functionality, then I will refer you to our Federal Contaminant Sites Demand Forecast GC Collab group. And on that group, you can also find the full-on report. So what I showed you today is a subset of the analysis that we did, but we have other analysis in that report that could be useful to you. Procurement approaches. So I think it may be of interest for some of you. So how we procure projects usually, it's when the sites, the dollar value is a bit lower and they're pretty simple in terms of risk, then we go through our standard procurement rules. So it could be standing offers, task authorization, supply arrangement. And how it works is these opportunities are tendered on for PSPC on buy and sell, for DCC on buy and sell and MERCs. And then we pre-qualified firm technically and price-wise. And then these agreements are good for an average of like 2 to 5 years, depending on the agreement. And then we work with these firms for a specific scope of services for that amount of time. When it comes to higher dollar value or more complex sites, then they're individually tendered on buy and sell when it comes to PSPC, and on buy and sell MERCs for DCC. There's another avenue is when it comes to Indigenous Services Canada, their sites are usually, it's the First Nation and the tribal council that individually put requests for bidders for assessment and remediation work on their land. So for these sites, it's important to have a good relationship with the individual First Nation Indigenous community when it comes to that. I would point out for buy and sell, it's not just a website to know what's the next tender or the next opportunity. There's a wealth of information on it as reference documents, the different clauses. I could say enough to go and explore that website because it gives tons of information. In terms of tools that we have, I'll focus on PSPC because this is my department. Most our procurement tools are regionally based, but we have two national tools. We have a laboratory standing offer agreement, which is good at least for another 2 years. So we won't be renewing this one anytime soon. But we have another one on training, which is set, I think, to expire next spring. So I would say keep an eye open on the buy and sell in the next few months. Then we'll be renewing that standing offer relatively soon. In terms of Atlantic, our procurement tools have been renewed or are in the midst of being renewed. So there's not too much opportunity out there. But for Ontario, we have it's pretty neat because we have consulting services tools, procurement tools, but we also have contractor for remediation activities tools. So in Ontario, we have one that is set to expire next year, a standing offer. So I would say keep your eye open over the winter for that renewal. I'm just going to look at my notes for the other region or the things that would be pertinent to you is in Quebec, we have the risk assessment services standing offer that will be set to expire. So it will be posted on buy and sell, I would say in the next coming month, at the same time as the remediation contracting tool. In the north, I would say, we have a really neat tool, which is again a remediation contractor, but this time around is a supply arrangement. And that supply arrangement is always open, meaning that your company, if didn't make it to the first cut or the second one, you can still get qualified on that tool. And then frequently PSPC will review and then technically qualify you to that tool. So I would say you can look for that one. And in terms of individual tendered, we have the Mobay High Arctic Weather Station, which is an Environment and Climate Change Canada site that is set to be tendered or posted on buy and sell, I would say this winter, and the goal to have it awarded in the spring. And this site is a multi-million-dollar project, will include some demolition, removal of impacted soil, as well as building material. And the particularity with this site is located in one of the most isolated area of Canada. So it takes a bit of creativity, a lot of logistics to get to that site. I wanted to point out that within PSPC, we have the Office of Small and Medium Enterprise. They have a national presence, but they also have individual office throughout the country. And they're pretty neat to help you navigate through all the hoops and loops to do business with the federal government. They do have an excellent training on how to do business with the federal government, which I highly recommend if you haven't taken it. And then I'll pass it on to Alyssa.
Thanks, Martine. So like everybody, the FICSAT program has been facing some challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly around travel and fieldwork. Although the good news is that we've heard that much of this work will be able to continue with minimal delays. As we continue to move forward, the program is always looking for ways to improve, and through phase 4, several areas of focus will be increasing Indigenous engagement and opportunities, increasing the use of innovative or sustainable technologies, increasing opportunities for small and medium enterprises, ensuring climate change resiliency of federal contaminated sites, and we are always open to hearing additional ideas moving forward. So with that in mind, that brings us to our next poll. In your opinion, how can the FICSAT program improve?
And I'll just add while you're answering that poll, if there's any questions you want to put in the Q&A or the chat, we'll be able to answer those after the presentations here. And I understand that the polls aren't necessarily working if you're on your phone. or on an iPad or other device.
All right, so poll results are in. It looks like 60% of you think that more opportunities for the use of innovative or green technologies is an important area that the FICSAT program can improve. Closely followed by better integration of climate change resiliency measures and more opportunities for small and medium enterprises. And with that, I will hand it back to Martin.
Excellent. So we're almost at the end of the presentation, which is great because it gave us about 15 minutes for questions, which is excellent. So on this slide, you see the contact information. You have Alyssa, you have Jeffrey as well, you have mine. And in terms of the Office of Small and Medium Enterprise, I put the national contact information, but we have offices throughout the country. So if you're interested, I can provide that to you. And I also included a contact information for Defense Construction Canada. Last slide is just how to access GC Collab. I highly recommend it again to connect, join this this group. That way you're going to be aware of future events that we'll be putting on related to the demand forecast, as well as the presentation. And then we have time for questions.
Okay, thank you, Martine, Alyssa, and Jeffrey. Again, if you want to post any questions you have, go ahead and add them to the Q&A or the chat. We do have a couple questions, so I'll direct these to our panelists as appropriate. The first question was regarding the breakdown in budget by province. I believe, Martine, that was in your presentation. Is that correct, Martine?
Correct. I'll go back to the specific slide. So I'm assuming the question is related to that circular diagram. Yes, it's based on the funding distributed, the funding estimate for each region.
Okay, thank you. We have another question that's regarding value of projects. Martine, this might be for you too. How do you distinguish between lower and higher value projects?
Okay, and I think that is referred to a slide on procurement and purchase. So this is, we have general rules, but of course there's exceptions to the rules. But when we say lower dollar value, it's usually less than $1 million, and higher dollar value is about over $1 million, give or take.
Okay. I'm going to let you off the hook for the next question, Martine, and I think we'll flip one to Alyssa. Environment Canada, how are the priority of sites determined, Alyssa?
So that's a good question. Federal contaminated sites are classified by the responsible custodian, usually through consultants, based on the CCME, which is the Canadian Council of Ministers for the Environment, National Classification System for Contaminated Sites, or the Aquatic Sites Classification System, both of which use a risk-based approach to identify the impacts of the contamination on a site. And the results of classification give a class 1, 2, 3, or N to the site, class 1 being the highest priority, both for action and for FICSAT funding, followed by class 2, class 3, and then class N is either not contaminated or not a priority for action, so very, very minimally contaminated or with very low risk.
Okay, thank you, Alyssa. Okay, Jeffrey, I'm going to throw the next one at you because we haven't heard too much about this. Martine spoke a little bit about the impacts of COVID-19 and the pandemic on the FICSAT program. I wonder, Jeffrey, if you could address or speak to how it has affected the Northern Mines program.
Yeah, of course. The short answer is it has depended on the where the projects are in terms of their their life cycle. So some of the projects like Giant Mine have been in regulatory kind of years, and there actually wasn't too much of an effect. A lot of the work was local in the city of Yellowknife, so quarantine wasn't necessarily needed for these people. But for some other projects, we've experienced delays. All of our projects are done in consultation with local communities, whether they be Indigenous communities or just Northerners in general. And some of our partners have asked for pauses on the projects as they deal with COVID in their own homes. So we've accommodated those requests and adjusted our schedules. So my answer is it really depends on which project we're looking at. Some have experienced delays and some have been work as usual.
Okay, thank you, Jeffrey. Go back to you, Martine. We have about 40% of the audience is contractors and consultants, so not surprisingly, they're interested in procurement. This one is regarding, let's see, set-aside mechanisms for contractors. Do you see in this phase of fix-up more work being undertaken via set-aside mechanisms?
Good question. Set-aside is one of the mechanisms we use at PSPC. I'm not too sure if the same thing with Crown-Indigenous relation in Northern Affairs, but we have other mechanisms as well. We have this interested remediation contracting tool in the north, a supply arrangement. So set-aside is one of the mechanisms we'll use. It will be more or less this time around. I think it's too soon for me to tell.
Thank you, Martine. And I did have a note from someone in the Atlantic region saying they do have a standing offer for procurement tools set aside in the Atlantic region. Let's see. The questions are getting harder, Martine, so I'll warn you. Let's see, I'm just going to rephrase it a little bit. For more complicated remediation projects with larger dollar values, how will the contracting be evaluated as far as innovation technologies, greening and sustainability of remediation against price?
Excellent question. And it's always something we try to improve. We want to have more green innovative technologies. I will mention on that there's two, so people are not familiar, is if you're innovating green technology is not commercially available yet, then you can add, you can register with the Clean Growth Hub with innovation science and economic development to get funding that way and kind of test your technology. If your technology is proven and commercially available in Canada, then we try to have different ways or different clauses in the contract, and it's really individually based or regionally based the way we do these clauses. I know, I think I'm aware in Quebec, instead of being like a prescriptive proposal or request for proposal, sometimes it's more objective based. That kind of leave a bit more creativity to the consultant, the contractor, to propose something new and still efficient. So that would be my answer for that.
Okay, thank you, Martine. And I believe this answers this question to unsolicited proposals. If someone has a new technology out there, they would go to that hub. Is that correct, Martine?
Correct.
Great. Okay. Next one. Let's see. I'm going to direct this one to Alyssa. Let's see. Right. Sorry. Right. This one is about the role of expert support departments. How do you engage the expert support departments, and when should you engage them?
That is a question I could talk about for days, so I'll try and keep it short for the purposes of this webinar. But the best practices, I would say, are as a custodian, you should engage ESDs early and often anytime you have a question. That's what they're there for, is to support you in managing your contaminated sites. There are several points through the course of a site that it's required to engage with ESDs. anytime you have any specific questions, the way FixApp is set up is every region has what we call a regional coordinator placed in the Environment Canada Expert Support Group, who act as a one window into the program for any questions from their region. And they can direct them up to us as necessary or answer it themselves if it's something more localized. And I think I'll cut myself off there for that.
Yeah, we don't have days.
No.
But thank you very much for that. Let's see. I'm going to stick with Alyssa on this one. Under what circumstances would the federal government accept responsibility for a site that is not located on federal lands?
Sure. So it doesn't happen that often because Canada employs the polluter pays principle. So in general, any company or organization who is responsible for contaminating a site is also responsible to clean it up. However, there have been some cases in the past where the organization responsible for the pollution has gone out of business or gone bankrupt or for some reason cannot clean up the site. And here the government may accept responsibility as sort of a custodian of last resort is the term we use. This has occurred a few times, mainly in the north where mining companies have gone bankrupt historically.
Thank you, Alyssa. Jeffrey, the next one I'm going to throw your way. Hopefully you can answer this. How will contracting change on ongoing contracts for sites being transitioned from FixApp to the Northern Mines program?
I was looking at this question. Good question. My answer would be it won't change all that much. I don't think there'd be any substantial change to how the contracting is done. Previously, when the abandoned mines were funded through FixApp, some of them were came through contracts through PSPC. Some of them came through work from Yukon government. Some of them came through private agreements. So those will continue to move along through the Northern Abandoned Mines program. And it's basically just a change in the pot of money that is funding the contract.
Okay, thank you, Jeffrey. Almost down, the questions are almost all answered. Just say one more, I'll go with FixApp work plan. I guess we know it may change from year to year. How will we know about changes? What can we expect for updates? And I think that would go to Martine, right?
Yes. So as soon as the significant changes, then we'll let you know, mostly through this kind of setup, webinars, or hopefully one day face-to-face, we'll be able to go back to that. Most of the updates will happen in the fall. So the work plans are being worked on right now as through we call the Regional Integrated Planning Board. So all the custodians are meeting up and try to find efficiency, maybe bundling sites together, opportunity, things like that. So I would say look out for January. That's mostly when that will be available. And that planning is for the next 5 years. So we're looking for 21-22 to fiscal year 25-26. So that's the horizon we're working within. Every January, we'll have this full-on federal contaminated sites forecast analysis report will be posted on GC Lab. That's the easiest way to have access to it. The interactive map tool will be updated. In the spring, again, the custodians are meeting up again to do some planning. On a regular basis, the spring, usually the work plan don't change as much. Last year it did because of the pandemic. I think we had to adjust our work plan according to that. But I would say this is the major part, at least twice a year, unless there's an influx of money somehow to the program.
Okay, thank you very much, Martine. Panelists, you'll be glad to know that brings us to the end of the questions. So you did a great job answering all those questions. I want to once again thank you guys for taking time out of your busy schedules to do the panel. Very good presentation. Thank you very much, Martine, Alyssa, and Jeffrey. And with that, Sarah, I will turn it back to you.
So before we close out the session, I'm going to say a big thank you to everyone, Tim, yourself included. Thank you, Martine, Alyssa, and Jeffrey. What a fantastic discussion that we've had. So thank you for all you attendees for participating. And to RPIC and RPIC volunteers, along with the Willow Group for putting on the event. Please remember to visit the RPIC website for more information on upcoming RPIC virtual webinars and workshops. You can also find the recordings of previous RPIC webinars posted, along with this one, which should be coming within the next week or so. Also, we would love to hear from you if you are interested in volunteering with RPIC to assist with events such as these. Thank you very much, and hope to see everyone again. Stay safe.